Hi and welcome to this series where I'm going through the ITIL4 practices individually, and I'll be giving you the headline points that you need to be aware of in order to help you build your base knowledge around ITIL4. I'll also be discussing some of my real world applications of these practices in the various organisations I've worked at over the years. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and click the bell. You'll get the updates. Okay, so let's get to it. Today I'm going to be covering off deployment management, which is from the technical management practice. There's three of them in there. There's deployment management, infrastructure and platform management, and software development management. But we're going to be focusing on deployment management here today. Reminder, a practice is a set of organisational resources designed for performing work or for accomplishing an objective. The ITIL4 book talks around the purpose of deployment management, and it splits it out into a number of areas. So it talks about that it's about the moving of new or changed, and then a list of various items into the live environment. So for example, hardware, software, documentation, processes, and then it goes on to say, or any other component into your live environment. So this is stuff going into your production environment. It may also involve deploying components or services or products into environments that are not necessarily your production environment. They might be your testing or QA or staging environment. While we're on the subject of definitions, you'll hear CI and CD quite a lot in terms of continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment. Definition-wise, continuous integration, it's an approach where you're integrating, building, and testing code within a software development environment. Continuous delivery, again, it's an approach in software development where you can release your software to the production environment anytime, whenever you want. And it's this kind of approach, you end up having very frequent deployments because deployment decisions are made on a case-by-case basis, but usually because organizations prefer a slower rate of deployment. Continuous deployment it's an approach to software development where the change goes through the pipeline and they're automatically put straight into the production environment. So that is a way of enabling lots of deployments. In fact, you can even have multiple deployments per day. So some of the main players in terms of software and their services and applications adopt this continuous deployment approach. So you're basically delivering deployments daily. That obviously relies on the other point in terms of continuous delivery as well. There's a couple of practices related to deployment management you need to be aware of, and they are the release management practice, which is from the service management practice. Service management practice has 17 practices in there, and of which one of those is the release management. And also change control, again, that's from the service management practice. Just a very quick plug there, I've done a couple of videos on both release management and change control and change enablement, so please do check those out. Make sure you subscribe. You might also hear the term provisioning in organisations. I know I have. And when we talk about provisioning, the organisations I've worked in, and the ITIL4 book talks about this as well, is that when we talk about provisioning, some organisations separate it out. So they'll say, okay, provisioning is physical stuff. It's infrastructure-y kit typically. And when we talk about deployment, that equates to software. So it's the deployment of software. However, in terms of the here and now, when we come to the terminology of deployment, ITIL means both. So you're talking infrastructure and you're talking software. So just to reiterate that, take the word deployment, don't just think, okay, that's software. Well, no, it's not. It's actually infrastructure as well. Don't separate it out, I suppose, is the point. Deployment management practice, it covers services, it covers products in the widest sense. So it's not just your production environment, it's transporting whatever that deployment is on the journey between the different environments. So maybe you've got test, maybe you've got QA, QC, UAT, staging environments, pre-prod, production, so on and so forth. Think in terms of it's a new requirement, or it's an existing service but perhaps it needs changing somehow. There's a new module or a patch maybe, or an update or a new feature of some kind. Perhaps it's a new piece of technology in IT ops, or maybe it's a service request, or perhaps a service provider being added into the new ecosystem. It's a new vendor. So the crux there is about think broad, think wide in terms of scope here. The scope also includes clearing up behind yourself. So what I mean by that is, as a deployment goes through your different environments, test, QA, UAT, pre-prod, etc., whatever those stages are, there's an element of housekeeping needed here as well. When it comes to deployment, there's a few ways of doing this. You can do a phased approach, you can do continuous delivery, you can do the big bang approach, or you can do a pull deployment. And I'll explore in a bit more detail on each one of those. But you really need to work out what is relevant to the particular deployment. So you're going to have deployments that are small, you're going to have medium, you're going to have large ones. There's going to be different types, there's going to be different areas, there's going to be different impacts as well. Not that you always necessarily know the full impact, but you know what you know, but there may well be impact that you're not aware of. So phase development, so this is where you're deploying to a part of the production environment, a stage at a time. So maybe it's users in a department, or users within an organization. So maybe you would go, okay, well, let's do accounts first, then let's do HR and people, then let's do marketing, then let's do sales, etc., etc. Or maybe it's one office at a time in each country. So maybe you're going to do Edinburgh, we'll do the Edinburgh office first, then we'll do the Birmingham office, then we'll do the London office. Or maybe it's wider, maybe the phase development is by region. We'll do EMEA and then we'll do APAC. Or perhaps it's a country at a time. We'll do Paris first. You'll see there's a plan, there's a schedule that will be followed through on this phased deployment. Continuous delivery, it's typically used in software engineering as an approach. It's where you've got software in short cycles. So software can be reliably released anytime, any place, any way. It's kind of you're not really doing much manually here. You're trying to avoid things manually. So it aims at building the deployment, testing the deployment, and releasing the software. Greater speed, greater frequency are the elements there that come through the continuous delivery deployment approach. The components to that are integrated, tested, and deployed when they are needed. So the crux there is you're delivering and you're deploying on a regular basis, but there's really good opportunities there for a feedback. You've got your customer feedback loop there. Third approach in terms of deployment management, big bang. So this is the all-in approach. Consideration is needed here as to the impact. It could be significant compared to, say, a phased approach. But there may be other reasons why you want to take this approach. So perhaps speed is of importance, or that the change, there's a cultural change that needs to happen. Perhaps there's a cost, or there's a return on investment consideration there that says we need to get a really quick return on investment here, or some kind of business change. New or change components are typically deployed to all targets at the same time. Now, this can be good, this has got pros, and this has got cons. There can be good bits, there can be bad bits to this. And a good example of why you might need to take a big bang approach, even if maybe you didn't want to, is that there may be dependencies, there may be elements that won't work with the new system, so you have to do everything in one go. But caution is advised there. And then pull deployments. So if we think of servers, for example, so in a pull deployment model, an individual server contacts the main server or the master server, and then it gets whatever that configuration or whatever that software or that enhancement or module, whatever it is, and then it pulls it and then goes off and configures it itself, basically. New or changed software is made available in a controlled repository, so it's in a single location, and then the user or the server or the device, whatever it may be, downloads that software to itself, so it'll be a client kind of item, and then the benefit of that, of course, is it does allow you to decide when to do that update. So if you know that there's an update to be had, but it's not a good time just at the moment, you can actually choose when is a good time to do that. Slight aside on this, so you've got these four deployment approaches. You've got your phased, you've got your continuous delivery, you've got your big bang, and you've got your pull. There's also a push model as well. The push model is a master server, repository, source, or master device pushes that configuration or that software or that update out to those individual devices, and then the receiving source or the server or the device or whatever it is, and then that there's a command that will then run that remotely. Deployment management in terms of tooling, so there are a number of tools that I've come across in my many years in IT service management. I'm not affiliated to any of these by any shape or form, but I'm aware of AWS, Code Deploy, Octopus, Jenkins, DeployBot, Bamboo, and Google Cloud Deployment Manager. Also Chef, come to think of it. My main exposure has been around the Octopus, the Jenkins, and the Bamboo area, but there's lots of tools out there. I've just sort of mentioned half a dozen there, but certainly there's lots of tools out there that will help support deployment, and there's lots and lots of them, and you need to look at them and understand, which one's best for your particular organization. The other point just to bear in mind, and I talk from experience here, I worked in a regulatory environment where there was an update, a code update that needed to be updated to a piece of regulatory software, and it was absolutely critical that the original source of the documentation and the information went out to all of these different countries. It was a global update, but it mustn't be tampered with. It had to be. It was actually sensitive financial information. So once the software and the update had been agreed and it was accepted, it was under lock and key, if you like, and there were tripwire alarms as well. I'm talking virtually here. But the point was to avoid tampering. So once you've got your deployment, there are various models, or there's various approaches you can use, but certainly you may have heard the word definitive media library or definitive hardware store perhaps, but I remember this update, and it was under this lock and key, and there were trip wires there to make sure nobody had would sort of tamper with the updates, and then that was deployed, and it had to be absolutely identical, 100% the same as at the receiving end as the original source. Quite often tooling is integrated into your configuration management tooling as well, and that's really helpful for when it comes to auditing and change management. Communication aspect of deployments is part of the release management practice. Just going back, if you remember the release management practice, so I've done a video on that, so please do check that out. But the communication bit is kind of within that practice. The other point to be aware of is if you're in an organization where you've got multiple service providers, multiple vendors, multiple third parties, however you want to phrase it, but if you've got lots of suppliers, service providers, you must make sure you understand where the start and end points of those, not in order to sort of have a defined and sort of restricted vision. Actually, the opposite. You need to look holistically. Remember, holistically, that's one of those guiding principles within ITIL4. You need that end-to-end, that big picture view. Don't see a service as an island. There's lots of elements that are part of a service. You've got vendors, you've got networking, you've got data center, you've got software, hardware, devices, goodness knows. So don't look at it from a sort of an individual perspective. Make sure you're really adopting that ITIL guiding principle around being holistic here. Okay, so the other elements to talk about is around the service value chain. Remember the service value chain, it's right at the center of the service value system. Service value system, you've got your guiding principles, your governance, your service value chain right in the middle. The practices, you've got 34 of those, split over general management, service management and technical management, and then the continual improvement. So the service value chain here, so particularly the main area of activity around deployment management is design and transition and the obtain and build element with some improvement activity. Parting thoughts, use automation and optimize where you can with this practice. Again, think back to your ITIL guiding principles. Optimize, automate. This is a really good area where you should be focusing on. Consider the best approach for deployment as to your specific environment. Each organization, each sector, each organization, each way of doing something will be different, but take into account business drivers, the vision, what's the value you're looking to achieve, what's the outcome. A good place to start here when you're considering deployment approaches is look at the 4 dimensions of service management. Now you remember those, of course you do. It's organization and people, it's information and technology, partners and suppliers, and it's value streams and processes. And don't forget those pestle factors while you're at it as well. But that's such a good place to start. Another just element to think through is if you have automation tools in play, are there any financial or cost implications to take into account here? Is there a budget there? Perhaps you need to be considering how quick does the business need these changes or this service or this product? Is it as soon as possible? Is it within 6 months? Is it 12 months? These are all considerations around how are you going to deploy. If you've got an automation tool, are there costs? Is there a budget you need to be thinking through? What about the risk? What about the security aspect? Perhaps it's a particular security update that absolutely needs to be put into play because there's a big risk there that the company could be exposed. Also think about frequency. So your approach, you need to at the back of your mind think, is this going to be happening every month, every quarter, once a year? Just think about that frequency. That again will help you guide in terms of your approach, and also your user base. What level of expertise from an IT perspective does your user base have? Are they good? Are they bad? Do they need a lot of training, a lot of hand holding? Again, those are elements that need to be considered in the deployment management. So whether you're going to go for phased, whether you're going to go continuous, or whether you're going to go big bang or pull, all of these are good considerations. Really think on the 4 dimensions of service management. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and hit the bell.